Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be trying out some new designer fragrances. All of these fragrances were released within the last 12 months and I've been trying some of these out for several months now, and I just wanted to let you know what I thought of them. And I'm also going to rank the fragrances at the end of the video because I sometimes find that really useful to know how people rank things in regard to other fragrances and whether they would buy them or not. So if you like this kind of content, then please do consider subscribing if you haven't done already, and also please like this video if you do end up liking this video. So let's get on with talking about these fragrances. So the first fragrance is actually one from Narciso Rodriguez, and it's a new flanker from the Narciso line, and it's actually called Eau de Parfum Cristal. So this fragrance comes in an almost transparent version of the Poudrée flanker bottle, and I would say that that's quite a good description of this fragrance. So it does have echoes of Poudrée, but it definitely is a more transparent feeling fragrance. It's definitely much lighter than Poudrée, and it's definitely nowhere near as powdery. So this fragrance opens with bergamot and also with a really creamy freesia, and actually those two notes seem to fade back quite quickly, especially the bergamot. The bergamot's gone very, very quickly. And you get really left with more of an orange blossom kind of fragrance. This fragrance in the mid really makes me think of fragrances like Guimauve from Les Notes Gourmandes Reminiscence line. It really has that sort of powdery, marshmallowy, orange blossom kind of feel to it. You do get other white florals in this fragrance, but really it's the orange blossom that does stay dominant. And actually, as this dries down further, it does end up to be a rose musk fragrance, but still with those white florals. I'd say the rose here is quite light and quite fresh and quite pink, but the musk here is also quite creamy rather than a powdery musk. And it's something that really isn't that heavy for a Narciso fragrance. When you think of Narciso, they are really a brand that are famous for their musks, and I would say that this one is definitely on the lighter side of that scale of their musks. I think this one is just quite elegant. It's something that I can imagine wearing to a spring-summer wedding. It's something that would work well in a work situation. It's quite a formal kind of fragrance, but it's not really anything that has any edges on it. It's quite a soft fragrance. Even though it does project and it does last well, it is quite soft. I think this one, it doesn't really stand out for me. There's nothing particularly special about it. Considering how much I love Poudrée, I just ultimately prefer that flanker to this flanker, and that's why I wouldn't choose to buy it. But I think that this fragrance is something that would be an all-rounder. It's something that you could wear all of the time, and even though it isn't that, it doesn't have a punch about it, it is just a pleasant fragrance. It's one of those crowd-pleasing fragrances. So that's Narciso Eau de Parfum Cristal. So the next fragrance is actually a flanker fragrance, and it's one from Jimmy Choo. So this one is I Want Choo Forever. So this fragrance is actually the flanker of I Want Choo, and my friend at work wears I Want Choo as her signature fragrance. So I'm really familiar with that fragrance. And this one actually opens with a black cherry note, and I was really quite excited by this having cherry in this fragrance. I was really thinking this was going to be a really strong, really syrupy cherry, and it really isn't. It isn't a strong cherry at all. The cherry really is only really present for me in the opening. It really fades back in the dry down. It's still there, but it's just very much more background in the later half of this fragrance. So in the second half of this fragrance, you really get more of a rosy, kind of almondy vanilla fragrance, and there's also something a little bit musky about it somehow. I think this fragrance and I Want You are kind of tied together by that jasmine note in both of these. That's really the thing that hangs these two fragrances together. I think without that, they would be very, very distinctively different. But actually, they are noticeably flankers of each other, and I think that's a really nice touch on Jimmy Choo's part, that it is something that is recognisably flanker, but it is still significantly different and has its own identity. I think this one is marketed as something that you would wear to go out, and I think the disappointing thing about this for me is that it's not that strong. It doesn't really project, and it's something that doesn't last that long on my skin actually. And I don't think that's really what you want from a fragrance that you wear to go out. You want something that's going to be sort of a little bit louder really, and to last a bit longer. I do really like this fragrance though, and I really enjoy the first part. I really like the second part with that sort of like dry down with the almondy vanilla. But I do think this goes a little bit shampooey at points, and that's a little bit disappointing. But overall, you know, this is a nice fragrance. I don't really have anything negative to say about it other than the projection and the lasting power. So that's I Want You Forever by Jimmy Choo. So the next fragrance is actually one from Issey Miyake, and it's one from the Drop to Issey line, and it's actually the Eau Fraîche flanker. So this fragrance, I really do like the original of. I really like the Drop to Issey line, and actually I recommended the original fragrance to someone who was looking for a wedding fragrance, and she tried it and immediately bought it and wore it for her wedding. So it's not just me that loves Drop to Issey. So this one I was really excited to try, and actually it didn't disappoint. I really like this one too. So this fragrance really starts out as an aquatic, very fresh fragrance. It's very watery. It sort of smells like there's watery fruits in here, like almost something like melon or something like that in the beginning. And actually there's still that original lilac that's in the original fragrance, but it's very much toned down compared to the original, but it still does have that really creamy floral feeling to it. As this fragrance dries, you do get a touch of ambroxan, and actually the ambroxan throughout is something that's very smooth and really adds to the fragrance. It doesn't really take anything away from it. It's not that grainy kind of salty, overpowering ambroxan at all. It's more the smooth, really nice, soft ambroxan that just adds a lot of lasting power and a lot of freshness to a fragrance and really contributes to that aquatic feeling. I think this one, as it dries further, you get an impression of like a fresh pink rose with some dewdrops on it. It feels really petally, really soft and just really floral and fresh really. And actually that stays along with the lilac note in this fragrance. Towards the end, this fragrance goes really like a body cream, much like the original, but with the original, that sort of strays more into a sun cream kind of region for me. It's a very solar feeling fragrance. This one is less solar and more aquatic, and I just really like how close this is to the original, but how different it is as well. I think that's a really interesting thing, and I think actually out of the two, you don't need both. I think you could just have one, and I'm struggling to choose between these two because I would like one of them, and I feel like I prefer the opening of the original, but I like the dry down of this one more. So yeah, I think Drop to Issey Eau Fraîche is a really long-lasting fragrance. It doesn't project that well. It's something that's quite a skin scent, but you just smell very clean and very fresh, and it would be perfect for spring summer. So that's Drop to Issey by Issey Miyake. So the next fragrance is actually one from Paco Rabanne, and Paco Rabanne are a brand that I just don't love. I've tried a lot of their fragrances, and I can't say that any of them I've really particularly enjoyed. So this one is Fame by Paco Rabanne. And this one is a fruity floral fragrance, really, mainly fruity. I'd say if you like jasmine and you like mango in that order, then you'll probably like this fragrance. So this starts out as quite a honeyed mango white floral fragrance with a citrus orange twist to it. And actually as it dries down further, it turns into something that I think of as more of something like a cocktail. The mango kind of dies back a bit and it turns more into something that approaches pineapple but doesn't quite get there. And the fragrance itself becomes more white floral, so the jasmine really becomes very prominent. And also you get a kind of creaminess to this fragrance, almost something like lactonic about it. And I don't know whether that's the sandalwood or something else in this fragrance, but it just gets very, very creamy. It also smells a little bit powdery, it also smells a bit soapy, and it's just a very sort of, you know, it's inoffensive, an inoffensive fruity floral fragrance. For me, there's nothing complicated or groundbreaking about this fragrance. I think actually the jasmine in this fragrance reminds me a little bit of the jasmine that's in Good Fortune by Viktor and Rolf. If you smelt that, you probably kind of imagine how the jasmine's going to smell in Fame. So this fragrance lasted about 5 hours on me, and it did project quite well. I think this is just not a fragrance for me. It's perfectly fine. There's nothing really bad to say about this fragrance, but it just didn't really excite me. So that's Fame by Paco Rabanne. So the next fragrance is actually one from Prada, and it's called Paradoxe. So this fragrance I think has really been having a moment, hasn't it? I think this was really, really popular when it first launched. It got quite good reviews, but people were sort of saying that it is very similar to a lot of other fragrances. And I see what they mean. This fragrance is a really happy, bright, uplifting white floral fragrance, and there are quite a lot of white floral fragrances on the market right now. If you're a fragrance that has mainly orange blossom and you have citrus notes, you have a lot of competition out there right now. So this one opens with just a really bright, happy citrus and some white florals, primarily orange blossom, but also a bit of neroli as well. And the neroli here is quite well behaved. It's not something that's super sour. It's not something that really takes over, but it definitely is present. I think this fragrance, as it dries, transforms a little bit. So you do still retain that orange blossom, but there is a little bit more jasmine that becomes more prominent. And there's also a bit of a powdery amber, a really powdery vanilla amber for me. And there's also some ambroxan. And I'm not quite sure what contribution ambroxan or amber is giving to the fact that I don't really like the dry down of this fragrance. So for me, I really struggle with powdery ambers, and this fragrance really reminds me of the dry down of Dolce & Gabbana's The One. And that's a fragrance that I decluttered because I couldn't stand that sort of powdery ambery dry down. And this has a similar thing. It's not the same, but it definitely reminds me of that dry down and why I didn't like it. And I think the ambroxan here is really quite grainy and quite unpleasant. But actually, I think that means that it's quite a long-lasting fragrance. This really lasts on my skin and it really projects as well. It's something that is quite strong. And I think that's really what people want in life, isn't it? They want something that other people are going to be able to smell. And that's definitely what you get with this fragrance. I think, you know, this is compared with a lot of other white floral fragrances. And I wouldn't say that it's that similar to things like My Way or, I don't know, whatever other fragrances this is compared to. It doesn't strike me as something that's exactly the same as something else, but I get what people mean because it does share a lot of similar notes. I think really this is just not that original, is it, as a fragrance? This kind of path has been done, and that's why people are saying that. But I think if you do want something that lasts, something that projects, this is probably a good fragrance to go for, but it's just not really for me. So that's Prada Paradoxe. So finally, I'm going to rank these fragrances. So what did I think? Well, I think in joint 4th and 5th place, I'm going to put Fame and Paradoxe. So I think that Paradoxe, the ambroxan in that fragrance and the amber just totally put me off. But also Fame is just not something that grabs me. And I think Fame is a less versatile fragrance than Paradoxe. So that's why they're both 4 and 5. I think probably Fame is number 5 and Paradoxe is number 4 really. So number 3, I'm going to put I Want You Forever by Jimmy Choo. So that one, I really did like the fragrance, but it just didn't last and it didn't project. And for a fragrance that you want to wear for going out, that's advertised for going out, I just don't think that's good enough. So that's why that was number 3. But I do really like both parts of that fragrance. I like the opening, I like the dry down. But yeah, it's just not fulfilling what it was briefed to be, basically. Number 2, I'm going to put Narciso's Eau de Parfum Cristal. I think this fragrance is really elegant, it's really clean smelling, it's something that would be great for a wedding, but it's just not something that I really need. But I do think it's a pleasant fragrance and it is something that would suit most situations. It's a very versatile fragrance, but just not for me because I have Poudrée. And in the number 1 spot is actually a fragrance that I might end up buying. So I really like the Drop to Issey line, and this one and the original Pillar fragrance, I really do like both of them. I think that I will end up with one at some point, and it's just a question of me choosing which of the 2 I will eventually buy. But I really did like this fragrance. I liked the aquaticness of it, and I liked the lilac. I liked that rose at the end of the fragrance. And yeah, I just thought it was a very elegant, very clean smelling, nice fragrance that would be perfect for the summer. So that's Drop to Issey Eau Fraîche is my number 1. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed the video, then please press the like button and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know, have you tried any of these fragrances in this video and what did you think of them? Would you rank these fragrances differently? Have you bought any of these fragrances? Please let me know down below and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.